Well, welcome into Bayou Roar. On this episode, we are talking about Lane Kiffin going to LSU to be the new head coach. And if we got some time, we might run through the rest of the just crazy coaching carousel that's been going on. But of course, Lane Kiffin has officially decided to become the new head coach for LSU football. And look, this was a crazy weekend with a lot of ups and downs. I know for a lot of you, whether you're an LSU fan, an Ole Miss fan, if you're Marty Smith, or if you're just a regular Joe Schmo college football fan, this was a long weekend trying to figure out how all of the dominoes were going to fall in the coaching carousel first, but then also with just this decision from Lane Kiffin. And look, I know it really does stink for Ole Miss that he left the way he did and that this whole decision went down the way it did, but at the end of the day, you just have to live with it at this point, and you got to move forward because it played out how it played out. And I don't blame Ole Miss for not letting him coach in the college football playoff. I'll go ahead and get that on the record. I would have done the same thing if I was in that position because when you're going to a rival school within the same conference and you're recruiting the same kids for the most part, I mean, you're going to obviously not want him to just be walking around your campus knowing he's already got 1 foot out the door. If he was at LSU and then decided to go to Alabama or, Texas or wherever, I wouldn't want him to do that either because I would feel like the same way Ole Miss feels. That you just can't have that happen. But I do feel for Ole Miss fans and for Lane Kiffin because I know for both of them, they wanted to see this year's Ole Miss team succeed. And it feels like it's kind of crumbling at the seams a little bit now with Kiffin, out the door and gone to Baton Rouge. But at the end of the day, Lane Kiffin is the new head coach for the LSU Tigers. And look, I won't bury the lead at all. I think if you were to grade this hiring for LSU, it obviously gets an A rated grade. Whether that's an A plus, an A minus, a solid A. I mean, you can't get it, I think, any lower than an A. And look, I think I should go ahead and address I have not been too kind to Lane Kiffin, both on this podcast or if you've talked to me just in my personal life about it. I have not been too kind to Lane Kiffin as a person just because his arrogance, his ego, just the way he has conducted himself in the past, nonetheless, how he's conducted himself kind of over the last, couple of days leading into, the start of the new week here on Monday. But you can't deny that he's a good football coach. When it comes to offense, obviously he is brilliant. And when you look at what he's done at Ole Miss, you can see that he's kind of really taken a hold of how college football has changed. And we'll talk about all that in a little bit. But at the end of the day, I mean, this is an A move for LSU. Of all the names you could have landed, this was the guy that, was at the top of most people's charts of like, hey, if you can get him, that's, a home run level higher. And as much as I may not like him personally, like as an individual, maybe over time he can win me over if he can maybe cut out some of the antics. But I know at least on the field, there's going to be some good things that come from Lane Kiffin being at LSU. So with that being said, there's been a lot of questions, over the last few days of this whole decision. And most of them kind of center around why would Lane Kiffin even want to leave Ole Miss for LSU when he's gotten them to such a good position right now? And I've got some reasons as to why I feel like he chose to go to LSU, and I'm going to share those now. And then I'll talk about what Kiffin's going to bring to the table and what he'll still need to show as the LSU head coach. But the first reason why I think he chose to go to LSU over Ole Miss was the resources he's going to have at his disposal in Baton Rouge. It's been well documented at this point that LSU has promised him that they are going to back him up when it comes to NIL. They are promising him that he'll have at least $25 million in NIL funds to play around with. Now, we'll talk about how NIL and revenue sharing is going to kind of change the way everything works in college football in just a second. But here's the ultimate thing. With this new wave of NIL and with this new wave of rev sharing rules that are about to come out, LSU has gotten all of their ducks in a row. And they have really set it up for the better now. And they are going to have the money to back it up. I've also seen several reports, even before the press conference today that Lane Kiffin had, that there's a lot of boosters that have not really been in support of the program under Brian Kelly that are now starting to kind of come back out of the woods, so to speak. And they are starting to commit more money. And even boosters that have been on board and have been paying for NIL and buyouts and all that stuff, they're even starting to raise their commitments a little bit. So you've got the financial backing of LSU, of LSU fans, and you've got a really good system in place. The I don't know what it's called now, because it's not, I don't think the NILSU thing is, you can't have a collective anymore, so to speak. But the new LSU basically NIL, group on campus has set this thing up where it is very professional. It is very straightforward. And I mean, when you're talking about NIL systems across campuses in the NCAA, LSU is going to have one that is, head and shoulders above most, if not one of the best in terms of just how they've set up for that. And so obviously that was very attractive to Kiffin. He even talked about that during his press conference in front of the media on Monday, that one of the things that really swayed him to LSU was the systems that they had in place and the fact that they were going to promise the student athletes as much money as they promised that they would, allow him to share with the players. So all that being said, those resources financially are obviously great. You have the top-notch facilities that LSU has as an SEC program and as just a premier program across college football. And then, of course, I think it doesn't, just fall to the wayside to think that Lane Kiffin loves the fact that he's got one of the premier atmospheres to play in all of college football. He talked about that several times during his press conference. Just, the lore, the atmosphere, just everything that goes into playing a game in Tiger Stadium is something that he's clamoring for. And I mean, you heard him pretty much all season this year talk about how he wished Vaught Hemingway could consistently get to the level of a big time atmosphere. And he's going to have that, especially if they're winning pretty much every single week, no matter who the opponent is at LSU, because they love the Tigers and they love, their team, and they're going to go out there and support them. So, I mean, just the resources you have at LSU are so great that it's one of those jobs that, man, yeah, you might have some great stuff going on at Ole Miss and have some great resources available, but LSU's they're going to hit a lot differently. And so I think that's the first reason why choosing LSU for him was maybe not as difficult, on paper at least, as it might seem when you're just comparing the two schools directly. But I think the other part of this is you're going to have a lot easier of a time recruiting at LSU than at Ole Miss. I kind of went back through the last couple of recruiting classes for Ole Miss and went back through the last couple of classes for LSU recruiting on On3's site. And man, just the comparison was wild to see, just in terms of, where obviously the rankings were for both. But then, to see just also, On3 does this really cool thing where they show you like the percentage of how many kids in a recruiting class are from, the state like that you are in. So for LSU, how many, what percentage of the kids are from, Louisiana in a class and all these things. And more times than not, Ole Miss featured classes that were very heavily out of state. And not only that, they weren't necessarily just these high flying, you know, top ranked classes. So last year he had the 19th ranked recruiting class according to On3. In 2024, you had the 20th ranked recruiting class. In 23, you had the 20th. And for some reason on the app, that's as far back as they're going to let me go. But I mean, it's been somewhere in the 20s for the most part for Lane Kiffin at LSU in terms of high school recruiting, since he took over. And for LSU in 2023, you had the 5th ranked recruiting class. You had the 7th ranked recruiting class in 2024. You had the 9th ranked recruiting class, in 2025. And currently you have the 11th ranked recruiting class in 2026. And you lost a few guys here and there, but you also are kind of heating up a little bit for some big flips. So obviously you have a chance to propel yourself forward in this class as well. All that being said, LSU's high school recruiting base is just at a much different level than Ole Miss's has. And honestly, one thing I noticed too is that, while Lane Kiffin every now and again would land a 5-star, would land some high-rated players from Mississippi, a lot of his classes, like I said, were based out of state because a lot of the top-ranked Mississippi kids end up going to other programs. And they're not staying at Mississippi or Mississippi State. And so for Lane Kiffin, it's like, well, man, now you're going to have a place where you can recruit just about anyone. And you've got some great options, not just within the state of Louisiana, which is featuring some awesome players this year, like, Lamar Brown. But also you have a chance to go into Texas, and especially there's a Houston pipeline there where like you got Harold Perkins and things like that. Like you're going to be able to recruit in Texas. You're going to be able to reach into Mississippi. You have had a pretty good pipeline in the past with Florida. I mean, like there are options for sure for Kiffin to go out there and pretty much recruit anywhere he wants to. But just even in the primary areas directly close to Louisiana in LSU, you're going to be able to bring in some really highly rated high school guys. And on top of the NIL money and the roster funds that you're already promised, I mean, there's a lot you can do there, especially with really good high school players coming in. And so I think there's just an excitement that can come from that as a coach, knowing, man, recruiting at this SEC school was actually kind of difficult. And now I'm going to one that, man, I could almost go out there and get just about anybody I can think of as long as we can get the deal done. And so I just think having an easier place to recruit at is making your life a whole lot easier, especially for a guy like Lane Kiffin, that I don't think his strength is necessarily high school recruiting. I think he depends a lot more on like his staff members to do that. I mean, heck, if you keep Frank Wilson, if you keep some of these key pieces on staff, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, they definitely can get that done for you. And again, as long as you can build a pretty decent connection with most of the kids, unlike what Brian Kelly apparently just failed to do, then man, you can pull in some really great classes and have a lot of success in Baton Rouge. I really do believe that. So, you've got better recruiting here. You've also got obviously the history. You've got the championships. You've got Heisman Trophy winners. You've got a lot of players who have made it to the NFL, who have played at the highest level. You've had 3 different head coaches since 2000 win a championship at LSU and compete for others. Like, it's just a no-brainer that you have a chance to go to a school with a much better pedigree than Ole Miss had. And I think that's something that's getting lost by Ole Miss fans, is them thinking for some reason that now they are all of a sudden this blue blood program, when really, no, you're not. You've just been able to take advantage of this new era of college football and compete. And look, I think there needs to be a discussion at some point. I know it's all speculative at this point. It's not like you get a stamp next to your name as a blue blood program from the NCAA or something. But I think it's reasonable to ask that at some point we have a discussion on who truly is a blue blood in college football. And I think a lot of that has to be based off your past. A lot of it has to be based off of, how do you traditionally perform, year after year, even currently. And look, I know LSU's had their faults, over the last couple of years, towards the end of the Ed Orgeron era and kind of an up and down roller coaster with Brian Kelly. But when you look at the talent they've, like I said, put into the NFL, when you look at the talent that they have, even on those bad teams, the talent they've had on those rosters, the fact that they have had championships in the modern college football era. I mean, LSU, I think, should be a blue blood, just like the Ohio States and the Michigans. I'd throw Texas in there. USC, I think, even though they haven't had as much success post Pete Carroll, I think that's still a pretty premier program in just the bloodline of college football. There's programs. Alabama is one that's obviously a blue blood. Like, you have lots of true blue blood programs in college football right now, but you also have a lot of programs that think they are when they're really not. And Ole Miss is one of those right now. Just because they've had success with Kiffin the last, 5 years, and because they've elevated themselves into a much better predicament than they have been in the past, now they think all of a sudden they can go sit at the grown-ups table when it's like, no, 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 no. You've done some great stuff. That's awesome. But call us when, you win an SEC championship, or call us when you win a national championship. Just because you make the playoffs one year, and just because you may win one playoff game, does not all of a sudden make you a blue blood program in college football. I'm sorry. It just, it doesn't. And so when you have a chance to actually go to one of those jobs where the ceiling is very much so higher than Ole Miss's will maybe ever be, yeah, you got to go and take that job. Yeah, you have to take that opportunity. I don't think I think the whole thing with this process has been, there's not too many people out there debating that, Lane Kiffin didn't make the right move in terms of his career. Like, going from Ole Miss to LSU is basically a no-brainer. But where a lot of people are having trouble is how he handled everything on his way out the door, especially once he did decide to go, and fighting for staying with the team and all that stuff, and now all the drama around it. Like, look, all that set aside, Ole Miss is not at the same level as LSU. It never has been, and it honestly probably never will reach the same heights. And despite what Ole Miss fans like to think, because of how blessed they've been over the last couple of years, it's one of those things of, you've got to eventually, wipe your eyes, remove the rose-colored glasses, and remember, yeah, LSU, yeah, we've beaten them the last couple years here and there. Like, yeah, LSU hasn't been at the highest level recently, but they're still overall a much better program in the long run than we are. And so when you think about it from that perspective, yeah, it's a no-brainer why Lane Kiffin would want to leave. And then finally, here's the other thing that is going to be a harsh reality for schools like Ole Miss, like Texas Tech, like Indiana, kind of these more non-traditional powers that have really rose to prominence the last couple of years. There are some new NIL and revenue sharing rules that are about to drop that are going to make it very difficult for those non-traditional powers to really keep up with. And look, you're probably going to roll your eyes into the back of your head when I talk about this, because, it feels like we've all said this before, and, under the table deals have always happened, and yada, yada, yada. But look, there is new rules coming out now with NIL and with revenue sharing that a lot of programs out across the country are going to struggle with. Primarily being, you are now going to have to validate pretty much every NIL deal you make with a student athlete. You are going to have to go to the NCAA and say, okay, we've got, Jaden Daniels, he's going to make such and such from this NIL deal. He's going to make such and such from this NIL deal. And in total, his NIL is going to cost this much when he does all of these different deals. They have to make sure all of those deals are valid. All of those deals are actually worth, I guess, what they're paying for. This is just how it's been explained to me. And then they have to, pretty much say, okay, yeah, that's valid. He can get paid that, whatever. And if you are not ready for that coming off of the last couple of years where you've basically just been able to go, hey, Mansour Delane, how much do you want to come play cornerback here at LSU? Or like for Kiffin, hey, Walter Nolan, I know you're having a great time at Texas A&M, but how much can I pay you to come to Ole Miss and be our starting defensive tackle? Those days are about to drop and be gone. And again, I know a lot of you are probably rolling your eyes and going, well, under the table deals have always happened. Why do we think now that this is going to change? Well, because the rules are starting to be cemented into place. This is what we've been asking for a long time as college football fans, basically, for things to be put into place so that it's not just the wild, wild west and whoever has the most money out here to be spent. And now they are. And let me tell you, like I said, these schools that are not non-traditional powers, they're going to start slipping a little bit if they can't compete with the big dogs. And I think you're already starting to see signs of that, like LSU getting all their ducks in a row with this new NIL program thing that they've got. And I think Kiffin's not dumb. Yeah, he may be a little bit of a, I hate to say it, he may be a little bit of a clown at times, and he may be a troll, and he may kind of, do a lot of stuff that you don't really approve of, but he's not a dumb person. And I think when he sits back and he looks at the future of NIL and how that's all going to work, as a guy who has lived and died by the portal, being claimed the portal king, I think he sits back and goes, you know what? Yeah, it's been great here at Ole Miss while they've been able to just raise money and throw money at kids. But I need to go somewhere where they're actually going to have that thing organized and say, okay, we can get all of these brand deals done so that kids can actually get paid this money. Because again, when it goes to the traditional powers, who's got the better brand in college football? Is it Ole Miss or is it LSU? It's LSU. Who's got the better brand? Is it Ole Miss or Alabama? It's Alabama. Is it Ole Miss or is it Michigan? It's Michigan. Is it Ole Miss or is it Ohio State? It's Ohio State. The traditional powers, just the branding that they can provide to these deals is a lot more attractive to make NIL deals with rather than an Ole Miss or a Mississippi State or Indiana or whoever it may be. That's just the simple, plain, and truth. And that's why I think it's going to shift some things in a direction that a lot of programs are not ready for. Now, yes, could there still be some shady stuff on the side? Absolutely. I mean, shady stuff's been going down in college football, forever at this point. So, yeah, there could still be some under the table deals that slip through that nobody ever tracks. But all I'm saying is for the most part, things are about to kind of change in a way that a lot of people are not ready for. And I think Kiffin made the smartest move by choosing LSU because LSU already knows what's coming. They've already set it up, and it's already looking like they got a pretty impressive plan together for how to approach this new era of NIL and rev share. So, with all that being said, that's why I think he chose to go to LSU over Ole Miss. But there's also a lot of great things that Kiffin himself, just walking in the door, provide to LSU that I think are really awesome. And the first thing is, man, it goes without saying, he's an offensive genius. I mean, if there's one thing that we all know about Kiffin is he is going to bring the offense with him. That has been the case whether it's been at Tennessee, USC, Florida Atlantic as the OC for Alabama. The dude is an offensive savant. He knows exactly how to coach the offense. He's evolved it over time. I mean, he really has come up with an offensive system that gets results. And after this year, as an LSU fan, you should be absolutely salivating at the fact that you will no longer have to worry about having no pulse as an offense. You are going to now have the offensive firepower to be able to compete with just about anybody out there from this point moving forward. You just will. I mean, that's the one thing Kiffin will always bring to the table is the offensive capabilities that make him one of the best offensive minds in college football today, if not the best, and one of the best offensive minds in college football of all time. So obviously he's walking in the door with that, and that obviously puts him in a different category when it comes to who you could have gone out there and hired, because, I mean, here's the reality. If you did hire John Sumrall or Kenny Dillingham, or even gone to Joe Brady, who was a hot name for a while, or Kelvin Shepherd, who was like the guy that I really wanted for a long time in this process. I mean, there's things about all of those guys that you would have question marks next to. You know, well, would Dillingham's system work in LSU against SEC opponents? Could Kelvin Shepherd find a guy to run an offense that would be productive? Would Joe Brady just work overall, in this college football era rather than professional football? You know, there's just a certainty with Lane Kiffin because you've seen it work in the SEC and you've seen it work for a long time that you feel really good about. But the other part of that like maybe some of those guys don't necessarily bring to the table that Lane Kiffin does is SEC experience, and good experience at that overall. Look, I know that his time in Tennessee is pretty well noted as being kind of, well, not the best when it comes to how he left. I know his time at USC was not necessarily the greatest. And Florida Atlantic was good, but obviously it's Florida Atlantic. And look, he and Nick Saban definitely butted heads a lot when he was at Alabama, but they got results. And then when Saban finally kind of had enough, said, go to Florida Atlantic, just leave, just go. We're done. Like, yeah, he's had some ups and downs in his career, but look, when he got to SEC programs, even Tennessee, he had some good stuff going for him there before he just left. And I think somebody said this, and I don't honestly remember. That was so long ago at this point. I don't really remember everything that was going on at that time with the Tennessee Volunteers. But somebody did bring this up, and I was like, oh, I kind of maybe forgot about that. Tennessee had some weird stuff going on at that time, like in the athletic department. And I think the NCAA was really about to like lay the hammer down on them. And then they hired Lane Kiffin, and like Kiffin found out and was kind of like, all right, well, deuces. I'm going to USC. And so honestly, in hindsight, I don't know if you can really blame him for like leaving Tennessee the way he did, considering that was all like about to go down and happen. But still, he did some pretty good stuff at Tennessee in the short time he was there. There was a lot of excitement about what could happen if he continued to kind of move forward at Tennessee. But obviously the biggest thing on his resume right now, though, is what he's done at Ole Miss. Again, a non-traditional power, an SEC program that Colin Cowherd on his show on Monday said, what did he say? Or maybe it was his Sunday show. Pretty much said, they're a nothing program. That's what Colin Cowherd said. I'm quoting him there, saying they're a nothing program. Their last title was in the 60s. Like, they're a sideshow, basically. And that's the thing. He took a non-traditional power. He got them to a level that they've never been at before. And he did a really good job. I mean, let's give the man his credit what he's done at Ole Miss is nothing to laugh at. It's very, very impressive. And considering the fact that he did kind of get his life a little bit more on track, it seems like he has, in a lot of ways at least, grown up and changed a little bit. I mean, it does feel like he's done some really good stuff over the last couple of years. And so he's bringing in SEC experience. You're getting a proven guy that can win in the SEC. I mean, that's what pretty much any LSU fan was hoping for through this coaching search, that you got somebody that could be a proven winner and go out there and work. You weren't sure if you were going to get that with Sumrall or Joe Brady or Kenny Dillingham or whoever it may be. But with Lane Kiffin, he's going to bring the wins and the success with him because he's done it before in the SEC. Now, the other thing that he's going to bring to the table with that offensive masterclass he's going to have is your team will have an identity. If there's one thing that Brian Kelly's teams never really seemed to have, was a really strong identity. There wasn't like one thing that year after year you could say, hey, you know what? A Brian Kelly team is going to bring this to the table for LSU. There just wasn't. Maybe outside of like broken dreams or something like that. But I mean, every year seemed to be different. One year you had a great offense, but you had a terrible defense. The next year you had, a good defense and an offense that kind of was just meh. And then you had a year where you finally got a defense that you'd been dreaming about for years, and your offense is absolutely horrible. I mean, it was such a roller coaster of the way each team was. I mean, you kind of never felt like you knew what a team was going to look like under Brian Kelly. But with Ole Miss, you saw the identity that those teams had. And so with Lane Kiffin coming in, this team's going to come in. They're going to match his swagger and his, how he holds himself up. The team's going to reflect that. They're going to be flying around. They're going to be having a lot of fun. It's going to be fast paced. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be energetic. Like Kiffin's going to bring an identity with him to Baton Rouge, and his team's going to reflect that year in and year out. It's not going to change each and every single year. So that is at least a little bit nice to know, because I think if you don't have an identity in college football, I mean, there's nothing for the players to really get behind, or to just stand behind. When you're having an identity crisis, your players feel lost. Your players feel like they don't know what direction they're going in. And it can so easily fall off the rails. So with all that being said, your team's going to get an identity, which is awesome. The other thing Kiffin's bringing to the table is he is the portal king. I mean, he has had a very high success rate in the portal. And this is a guy that's going to be able to go into the portal and identify good talent and bring it in. The one thing Brian Kelly really failed to do, and maybe this is on the staff or whoever, I don't know, but a lot of times they whiffed more so than they hit in the portal. Unlike with Kiffin, where it felt like a lot more times they were hitting from the portal rather than whiffing. Whether it was Jackson Dart and Trey Harris or Walter Nolan, and I can't remember the other defensive end's last name. I know what it is. I just don't know how to say it. Umamanellan, something like that. I don't know. I can't remember. His brother's on the Ole Miss team right now. But, I mean, he was able to bring in guys from the portal that worked. Even guys like Trey Harris that maybe were coming from some smaller schools that absolutely broke out and became stars. Like, Kiffin's been able to find really great talent in the portal and utilize it. Kiffin can do that while Kelly never really could. And I think that's a huge advantage that you're getting because, like I already mentioned, you got the great high school recruiting that LSU can produce year after year, stacked on top of actual good portal additions that Lane Kiffin can go out there and find. And that is a mixture that is going to bring some success. So that is another thing that Kiffin brings to the table that I think is really, really awesome for LSU. Also, I mentioned this a little bit earlier. Kiffin understands that modern college football is not going to ever be the same as traditional college football. He even said today during his press conference that, and I loved this quote, honestly, from him. He said, you know what? It's not necessarily about finding the box. Sometimes you got to create your own box. And that's the thing in this era of, and I might have misquoted a little bit, but in this era of college football, you can't just go by the boxes, what you've always done in the past. You've got to be able to shift and adapt on a dime because things seemingly are changing every single year. Like I said, this past year was pretty much the last year you were going to be able to go out and just spend a bunch of cash to bring players in, like free agency. It's going to, at least on paper, change going into the next portal cycle. And so with that, you want a coach that's going to be able to adapt. Ryan Kelly was never able to adapt. He said he was, going to use the portal and all that stuff. But I mean, it just felt like he was always stuck in the mud thinking, I've done it this way forever. I don't want to change how I've done it. He wanted, even when he said he was going to use the portal, and he did use the portal, you could tell it just killed him on the inside because he wants to do things the old school way. Bring in your class through recruiting in the high school ranks, develop those players, and eventually have success after they've been developed and grown and all that. And that just doesn't work in this era where kids want to come in, play right away, or they're going to leave. I mean, Brian Kelly was known for producing really good offensive linemen in the NFL while he was at, Notre Dame. But that was because he could do that kind of stuff. He could bring in offensive linemen and develop them for a few years before they were ready to go out on the field. He wasn't ready to bring in like a 5-star Carius Kern and just throw him out there on the field. He wanted to develop him and all that stuff. And it's like, you just can't really do that anymore. You've just got to be willing to roll the dice and throw guys out there at this point because at the end of the day, whether you like it or not, they may just enter the transfer portal and leave. And yeah, that might not be fair necessarily, but it's the truth. And Brian Kelly just never could adapt to that. But Kiffin will, and Kiffin's shown that he can. And I think for Kiffin, that's one of his biggest superpowers in this coaching market is how well he has shown that he has been able to adapt. So I think that is obviously just a huge plus. But those are the things that Kiffin brings to the table already walking into the door that you've got. But with that, there's also still things that Kiffin has to prove as he comes into this new role as the LSU head coach. And the first thing that I've got on my list for that is, can he actually kind of grow up a little bit and not be so volatile? And will he actually stick around LSU for a couple years? He mentioned that he felt like LSU was one of the premier jobs in college football in the press conference. And look, I don't know why he would say anything contrary to that, considering you got to know your audience. But I mean, like I said, I don't think Kiffin ever saw Ole Miss as a long-term, hey, I'm going to stay here forever because Ole Miss is at the same level as an Alabama or an LSU or whoever it may be. I think he was waiting for an opportunity like this to open up, and once it finally did, and after he'd kind of had a chance to validate himself at Ole Miss, now he's getting offered these types of jobs, and he took it. But can he cut out, like I said, some of the antics, some of the other stuff? Look, you want Lane Kiffin to be who he is because he's not really going to ever completely change. But can he at least get to a point where maybe he matures a little bit more and he does some of the fired up, passionate, craziness in a more controlled manner? And look, LSU's won with some interesting characters before. I don't think anybody can say Les Miles and Ed Orgeron are necessarily quote unquote normal by any means. But man, Kiffin's just a different type of cat because not only is he kind of a character, but man, he can be absolutely wild and out sometimes. Even now that he's kind of cleaned up his personal life, he still be wild and out sometimes out there. And I just think at some point you got to cut out some of that stuff and just focus on, hey, let's go out there every single week and let's not just trash talk for the sake of trash talking, but go actually, put belt to butt and start handing out some L's out here on the field. I just want to see if he can do that a little bit. Take that next step forward in your maturity. Can he also balance the team? Here's the thing. There's been some years like at Ole Miss where you get Walter Nolans, you get some really great players in the portal, and you have a really good balanced attack. Honestly, that team last year for Ole Miss should have been the team that made it to the playoffs and made a run because that roster was a lot more balanced and it was a lot better. The defense was really solid. The offense had Jackson Dart, no, not Quinshawn Judkins. He had left. But you had Trey Harris. You had Ulysses Bentley. I mean, you had all the pieces together to go out and make a really good run. And then it just kind of, the wheels fell off the wagon. But, for Lane Kiffin, though, I mean, you look at the team this year, and it's like, okay, so your offense is still pretty good. Trinidad Chambliss is lighting it up. Your receivers you brought in hit, and they're doing really good. Your running back, Kewan Lacey, is obviously one of the best running backs in the country. But your defense is just not very good at all. And that's the thing, is that, that team is good for sure. The schedule kind of helped them out a little bit this year. They had a fairly easy schedule when all was said and done, looking back, with a lot of teams not hitting their ceiling as much as we thought maybe on paper going into the year. But Ole Miss kind of got bailed out by an easier schedule because the offense, while still good, they didn't have to worry too much about not being able to score enough points to win. And here's the thing that I don't think Ole Miss fans are also realizing with all this is that, like, yeah, you're having your best season ever and you're having a lot of success. But if you think this team's going to go out there and win a national championship with this defense that you've got, then you're completely wrong. This was a defense that gave up a staggering amount of yards and points to Arkansas, who is not a very good team this year. And I mean, listen, LSU played Arkansas really, really tight. They did not give up that much yardage. They just didn't. If LSU had more of a pulse offensively, they honestly blow out Arkansas. It's just one of those things of this team's not very balanced. And that's what's, I think, going to hurt Ole Miss in the long run in the college football playoff. But that's the thing. Kiffin didn't set that team up very well with its balance. So can he do that at LSU? I think a lot of it's going to be based off the staff that he has defensively. But, I think if he can keep some of the key pieces, that's going to be the key. And that's the thing. Can he, keep the key pieces he needs to keep on this current staff? Guys like, on my list at least, Blake Baker, Corey Raymond, Kevin Peoples defensively, to be able to kind of keep the culture on defense that you've already established that's really good, along with the recruiting prowess that those guys all have, as well as keeping guys like Frank Wilson on the offensive side of the ball who are really good at recruiting, especially in the Louisiana area. Can you keep those guys on staff and keep that kind of that culture that they can provide going? Or are you going to make a bad judgment and hire somebody that maybe you shouldn't? And then that allows for maybe some, balancing issues to become a problem. Because I think if you allow Blake Baker to kind of set the image for the defense, you're going to still have a really good defense for the majority of the time Lane Kiffin is in Baton Rouge. But if Blake Baker leaves, or if you just cut him or whatever, then you're going to be in a little bit more of a hot water situation. Now, at the time of me recording this, Blake Baker is apparently going to interview for the Tulane job, but it's not like a guarantee that he's going to get the head coaching job at Tulane. But it seems like Kiffin is very much interested in keeping Blake Baker and a lot of this defensive staff in place because of how much success they've had. So that's at least a good sign that as long as Baker doesn't just leave, it looks like he wants to kind of keep the party together, which is great. But can he continue to do that even if Baker, does decide to leave the coop, go somewhere else? Can he put together then a new guy in charge that can keep like a Corey Raymond and a Kevin Peoples who are doing really, really great work and just find a new head defensive guy? That's what has still got to be proven a little bit. So, balancing, staffing, all that stuff. Can you find the right people? Can you put them in place? He's got to prove that because LSU's just different. You got to have guys that know this area, that know the standards of LSU, and that's not always easy to find. So, with that being said, can he keep that up? Can he improve in the high school recruiting? That's yet to be seen. He's definitely got an opportunity to, but he's got to prove that he can do it. That's something that's not always been his strong suit, as I pointed out earlier. And then finally, will he just simply embrace LSU and Louisiana? That was something that Brian Kelly never really did. He never really embraced LSU and Louisiana as a whole. He always referred to the team as they or them. He always kind of seemed like he enjoyed being, and Peter Burns said this, seemed like he always enjoyed just having the title of being the head coach at LSU more than he actually liked being at LSU. Saban loved it. He embraced it. He dove headfirst into it. He had success. Les Miles loved it. He embraced it. He added his own flair into it. I mean, he obviously had success. Orgeron was like a hand in a glove. And that man fit everything perfectly. And ultimately, he had success as well. So can Lane Kiffin bring together just this culture where it embraces LSU, it embraces Louisiana, and he can put it together and have a lot of success? I think if he keeps the right people on staff, he can. But it's going to be hard because a lot of head coaches like to do things their own way. But I think Kiffin's got to learn from Frank Wilson on like, hey, you know why Brian Kelly really failed? Because he closed the doors on former players coming back. Because he was going after a 3-star in Nevada rather than a 3-star in his own backyard who grew up wanting to play at LSU, would stay here to be developed for a couple of years, would die for the program. Little things like that. And I think Kiffin's got to ultimately basically just take that as, okay, I've got to do this. I've got to embrace LSU and embrace Louisiana. From the press conference he's already had, I would say it seems like he has an understanding of that already, and he kind of already is taking the right steps in his approach to this job. But again, a press conference can always seem real pretty on the surface, and you don't really know until it gets started. But all I'll say is this. The press conference, it was a mixed bag in my opinion of like, there was some really good stuff. There was like some stuff you're like, okay, dude, like, I get it. You're apologetic. You respect things, all that stuff. You're saying the right stuff. But there were some gems from it that were like, okay, seems like he knows what he's getting into and what he's doing. And look, when it comes to staffing, we don't have any official word on defensive stuff now. It looks like the offensive staff is coming together. The Advocate already reported this, but Shea Dixon at On3 kind of officially put it out on the On3 site. Charlie Weiss Jr. is going to be your new OC. Joe Cox looks like he's going to be signed on as well. He was the tight end coach and co-OC. George McDonald, the passing game coordinator. And I think receivers coach is also looking like he's going to be signed. Sawyer Jordan, another receivers coach. And then, of course, Nick Savage, the strength and conditioning coach. And Mike Williams, a senior executive of player personnel. Also looks like he is going to be officially signed onto the staff too. So with all of those pieces coming together, looks like the offensive staff is kind of shaping itself out for Lane Kiffin here at LSU. And I would trust that he knows what he's doing with these offensive guys more than just about anybody else. But now it's going to be up to the defensive side. And so we'll see how that all plays out. But there is still been a lot of coaching carousel moves that have happened over the weekend. A lot of craziness outside of this Kiffin stuff that's been going on. And I just want to real quickly, as we wrap up, share some of my thoughts on the coaching carousel that happened this past weekend. So obviously Kiffin was the biggest headline news, which is why we spent a lot of time on that. But this past weekend, man, we had a lot of dominoes finally fall into place. And so I just wanted to share really quickly some letter grades for some of these hires that we now officially have across the state of college football. So for Virginia Tech, obviously they signed James Franklin. I think that is an A move for them. And honestly, for Franklin too. Virginia Tech has had a pretty good history in college football for the most part, honestly. But look, listen, if James Franklin goes in there and wins like 9 games a year, I mean, they are going to have such high praise for that man. The expectations are a lot different than at Penn State. I think that's a home run for him. I think that's a home run for Virginia Tech. I'll give them an A for that. Oklahoma State went out and got Eric Morris. I'm going to give that a C. I think Gundy had to go. But look, you're taking a really big roll of the dice, taking a guy from North Texas, bringing him to Oklahoma State and kind of hoping that he can really transform some things around. Now, I think there's a lot of potential for him there, but it's just, I think, I don't know. Maybe this was the best name you could get, but perhaps maybe there was some chances to land some other guys. So I give them a C for that. Colorado State, Jim Mora. I don't know if I can really say much on that. I don't know Jim Mora too much, but, decent move there. I'll give that one a C plus as well. Oregon State, Jamarcus Shepard. Now, I don't know what Jamarcus Shepard brings to the table. I know he was on the Bama staff. Honestly, I live in Tuscaloosa. Have never even heard that man's name until he went to go be the new coach at Oregon State. I'm going to give that, honestly, though, like a D plus. I mean, I know Oregon State doesn't probably ask for much considering it's just never really been like the best program in the world. But I mean, I feel like you could have gotten somebody with a little bit more of a pedigree than Jamarcus Shepard, who, again, I just don't even know really who this man is. So that was a bit of a disappointment. But then we move into some SEC jobs. Florida lands John Summerall. I give that a B plus. I like Summerall a lot. I do. I would have been fine with LSU going after John Summerall. Here's the problem. Florida put all of their eggs into the basket thinking they were going to get Kiffin. And now it feels like Summerall is always going to be seen as like the consolation prize, the ribbon they give to everybody else, more so than the coach you actually wanted. And I just wonder how that program is truly going to feel given those parameters. Again, I think Summerall will do a good job. I think he'll be better than Sunbelt Billy ever was. But you're taking another risk on another group of 4 coach that's never proven it in the Power 4. And not only that, he wasn't even your first option. This was not the guy you went all in on originally. So I think John Summerall is a good hire, but I'm going to give it a B plus because Florida kind of did him dirty by thinking they had Lane Kiffin in the bag and putting all their chips onto the table for him. And then now making him seem like kind of, we at least got our backup. And I just don't love that for him. Next up, Alex Galesh at Auburn. Auburn fans are going to love this. Alabama fans are not going to love this. I'm giving this move for Auburn, honestly, an A+. This is a great hire for Auburn, man. I mean, Alex Galesh is, I think, one of the most underrated coaches that are out there in college football. It looked like he was going to go to Arkansas for a minute. But, man, this is a great hire for Auburn. You're going to bring in a guy that's got a lot of toughness, a lot of grit, a guy that's going to bring, I think some really good stuff to this program. So, I mean, Alex Galesh, man, that is a really solid hire for Auburn. When it looked like DJ Durkin may be the guy, when it looked like they may be in the sweepstakes for John Sumrall, they kind of pulled out the ultimate like Uno reverse and said, nope, 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 Alex Galesh. And honestly, I love that hire for them. Then Arkansas went out and got Ryan Silverfield, the Memphis coach. And I give this one a C minus. I mean, I don't think this is the worst hire in the world. But man, Arkansas, I think after all that talk of like, we got to go out there and get somebody, that's really good, really solid. We're replacing Sam Pittman, with somebody that is going to be really fantastic. And then you go get a group of 4 coach that like has had a really good run at Memphis, but like doesn't have that same kind of track record that a lot of your SEC counterparts are hiring. It's not a great look. It's also not a great look when your fans are rioting and being like, we don't want this guy. Like, what are y'all doing? Not a great look for Arkansas. Arkansas is an absolute mess right now. And ooh, wee almighty. That is a rough hire for them. Now, this is very recent. This happened literally on the day I'm recording this on Monday. Oregon offensive coordinator Will Stein is pretty much set up to be the next head coach of Kentucky. I think they've officially released a statement now saying he is going to be the new head coach of the Kentucky Wildcats. Mark Stoops gets hired like really late on Sunday night. And it's like, what in the world, man? Like, why do you just decide after Sunday night when all these other dominoes have already fallen to now fire Mark Stoops? But listen, Will Stein is a guy that a lot of people were really high on, and a lot of people considered potentially rolling the dice on him as a guy in a lot of these coaching searches. And now he's going to be the head coach at Kentucky. Listen, Kentucky's missed a lot of flair offensively in the Mark Stoops era. This could be a pretty exciting hire for them. Time will tell what his strengths as a head coach will be. But like I said, sometimes in these coaching searches, I think we've got to forget that notion of we got to go out and just hire a head coach that has been a proven head coach and all this stuff. I kind of love this for Kentucky. I really do. I think this is an exciting roll of the dice because, again, a lot of people have really been high on him. And I think it was only a matter of time before he left Oregon at some point anyways to take a head coaching job. So I like this move for Kentucky. I'm going to give this one a B. I just think maybe they joined a little bit too late, but it looked like they knew what they wanted and they went out and got it. It's not going to be the most exciting hire out there, but it's a good hire. And the last one I want to talk about is our dear friends over at Ole Miss promoting Pete Golding, not just to the like interim head coach, but for the permanent head coach. And I really hate to say this, but I'm giving this a D+. I mean, this move, man, talk about an emotional reaction move. And talk about a move that just like you are kind of just trying to stick it to Kiffin by making this move. Hiring Pete Golding is exactly what that is. Pete Golding is a guy that I don't even know if I heard his name really even floated out that much in head coaching discussions. Like with Will Stein, I had heard him connected to several openings. And it was like, okay, I could see him potentially landing at a multitude of places. However, that was not really the case with Pete Golding. And again, it feels just very much more reactionary by Ole Miss than anything else. Well, I mean, listen, I've said it once, I've said it a million times at this point already. I'm all for rolling the dice on your coordinators to being either promoted like Marcus Freeman or whatever. But this just feels a little strange to me. Like this just feels just not good to me. And there are so many Ole Miss fans right now that I think are so, again, jaded by everything that just happened that they're like, yes, Pete Golding is the man. He is the guy. You know what? He wants to be here. He wants to do this. He's the guy in charge. He's going to do great. And I just don't know if I can sit here and say that I really think that that's the truth. I think you just wanted to promote a guy that actually wanted to be there rather than Kiffin, who was already 1 foot out the door. And I don't know. I think just not even trying him out as the interim is a very big, risky roll of the dice. Again, don't know who you really would have gotten at this point, but Pete Golding, I don't think is the answer that a lot of Ole Miss fans think he's going to be. I could be wrong. I might have to eat crow on that. But again, I just don't think that that's a very wise move from them. Feels very reactionary and it feels very, very risky. But who am I to say? I mean, listen, interim coaches have been hired before, and some of them have won titles, aka Ed Orgeron, but it's a very rare move that ends up being successful. So just be careful if you're Ole Miss. But with all that being said, that's where we're going to wrap this one up. Thank you guys so much for following along. Hey, if you would, please make sure to like, share, subscribe, wherever you get your podcasts from. No, we didn't have a video component this week for our YouTube channel, but if you are watching this video on YouTube, please make sure to hit that subscribe button because it's going to be a lot of fun here in Baton Rouge, man. Women's team is doing great right now in basketball. Men's team seems to be having a little bit more fun this time around, and man, baseball season is right around the corner, and I cannot wait. So keep up with us so you can make sure you keep up on everything going on with LSU athletics. And until next time, I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. And as always, let's go Tigers.